I'm going to come straight back on again and get another round of applause. That's fantastic, yeah. Good morning. That's good. It's good. We're going to do it again. Good morning. Oh, and one last time. Good morning. Welcome to OEB 18. Great to have you here. I'm Donald Taylor. I'm the curator of the Learning Technologies part of OEB. We've got 2 days ahead of you of great interaction, great content, and great building of connections that will last well beyond these 2 days. I'm very pleased to say, the host of the panel that we're going to kick off the conference with. It's going to be a great session. We're going to challenge ourselves. We're going to think about change in learning and education and what's coming up. Before we get the panel on the stage, before I introduce them, I would like to ask everybody in the room a question. I'd like to ask you, what do you think the biggest change is going to be in learning and education in the next 5 years? We've got 2,000 people in this room. We can't have a one-on-one dialogue, sadly. But what we can do is you can turn around, find someone you don't know, turn to them, introduce yourself, and answer that question in 1 minute. What's the biggest change in learning coming up in the next 5 years? 1 minute, go ahead. Thirty seconds. Find some great insight. Okay. That's not bad. That was 9 pings. My record is 11 pings. 11 pings in Tel Aviv. I was doing an event, and I thought, fantastic, we're going to get loads of feedback. Everyone's talking, they can't stop. And then nobody said anything. That's not going to happen here, is it? We've got some great thoughts to share. Right, let's have them. I want answers. What's going to change in the next 5 years in learning and education? In 4 or 5 words, please. Just keep it tight. Who's got something to share? Thank God. I had a flashback to Tel Aviv for a second there. Here we go. Catch. Okay. 4 or 5 words. Keep it tight.
The decrease of critical thinking in education due to the overtake of machine intelligence.
Wow. A lot of rumor, a lot of people. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Yes, no? Well, we're not sure. Okay. But the key thing here is less critical thinking, yeah? Because of machine thinking. Less critical thinking. That sounds dangerous. Any other thoughts? Here we are. Whoa, sorry. I don't play basketball.
I think the fundamentals will stay the same.
4 or 5 words. Let's keep it really tight. Come on.
Fundamentals stay the same. New technology.
Oh, I like that. Fundamentals remain the same, but new technology. What do the new technologies do? Do they add, detract, or augment? They augment, they make it better. That's a nice positive message. Any other thoughts? I've got one. Oh, no, I know. I didn't need to go to the gym this morning. There we go.
I guess we lose control on students' learning because they are moving toward the informal education more and more.
We're losing control. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Depends. If they are going to be more let me say, take responsibility for the learning and
If they
know
take
how to learn,
responsibility,
will be perfect.
that's good.
But not if we want to control and provide more mentoring for them. I guess we have to have information about the learning.
We have to have some control, but perhaps we don't need as much control as we've had. Thank you. I'm going to stop there. I know everyone's eager to speak. We have to get on to our panel. So what do we have there? We have a decrease in critical thinking. We have a possible loss of control, which may be a good thing or a bad thing. We also have this idea that learning technologies will augment what we're already doing, which fundamentally won't change. A quick shout, everybody in the room. Do you think the next 5 years is going to be, in 5 years' time, it'll be better or worse? Okay, I'm going to do 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1, and then shout out better or worse. Are you ready? 3, 2, 1. That was fantastically optimistic. I heard better. I'm going to believe it. I'm going to believe it. One thing, nobody said, well, 5 years, yeah, you know what, no change. Nobody believes there's going to be no change, because of course there's going to be change, isn't there? And fortunately, we've got a fantastic panel to help us look at that in a variety of ways. Each of them is an expert in their own field. They're going to share their expertise with us today. Please come up to the stage, our panel. Go on, give them a round of applause. Fantastic. I'll introduce our panel. I'll tell you briefly what's going to happen, then I'll shut up and we can get the great value out of the panel. So we've got our three panelists today. Anita Schurl-Breda is co-founder at Iris.ai and also faculty member at Singularity U Nordics out of Norway, serial entrepreneur, currently working on AI in the R&D field, helping people cut out much of that initial work of trawling through the discovery phase and getting down to the real business of interpreting data. We've got Brian Kaplan, Professor of Economics at George Mason University, widely published author of for example, the New York Times called his book The Myth of the Rational Voter, the political book of the year. For our session today, he also wrote a book called The Case Against Education. Very much looking forward to hearing what he's got to say. And then we've got Jeff Mulgan, Chief Executive of Nesta and widely published author, also Senior Visiting Scholar at Harvard, and he co-chairs a group at the World Economic Forum looking at innovation, particularly in reference to the fourth industrial revolution. What a great panel, ladies and gentlemen, aren't they? They are. All right. What's going to happen next is we're going to have each speaker go to the podium, share their insights with us for about 15 minutes. During the course of that, and while the speakers are speaking, I'm very keen to get your thoughts on what's going on. Of course, we'll have Q&A at the end, after everybody's spoken. But while people are speaking as well, let's start the debate using the hashtag #OEB18. If you can tweet with that, I will pick up stuff on my iPad. Hannah down here is going to be following just that on her PC. Let's get your observations. That will then spark debate also outside the room. And I always believe in sharing as widely as possible. Let's get insight from around the world. Let's find out what the views are around this. So 15 minutes each, roughly, from our speakers, Q&A, and then we'll wrap up around 11 o'clock and kick off the conference. So let's get going. Jeff, would you like to take to the podium, please? Thank you very much.
Right. I'm not going to take a podium anywhere. I'm going to leave it right there. And, well, first of all, thanks for the invitation to be with this fairly amazing group of educators and innovators. My neighbours just then said the next 5 years will bring no change at all. So we'll see if they're right or not. We were told to be a little bit annoying to get your kind of blood flowing, so I'm going to say a few things which may challenge, you may disagree with, but I hope at least get a debate started. I'm going to say a bit about futurology, a bit about ed tech. I'm going to share some data, because you always like data in the morning, and then say a bit about future skills and where I think this is heading, which is new models of collective intelligence alongside the artificial intelligence. So let's start with futurology. If you read the futurology of the last 50 years back to the 60s and today, it basically says the same thing. fewer jobs, less work, less tenure, more project-based works, fewer big companies. And amazingly, for 50 years, that has been wrong. Many countries have more jobs than they had 50 years ago. Tenure is about the same. There is more project-based work. And big companies have a larger share of global GDP than 10 years ago or 15 years ago. And here are some covers from Spiegel on how automation is about to wipe out millions and millions of jobs. And the first one, as you can see there, is 1964, the high point of the Beatles. Now, they may be right this time, but I think it's very important to be skeptical of casual, lazy futurology. And so what I'm going to talk about is a number of ways we can get better at navigating the future, an unknowable, complex, messy future, but so far as we can using data and using evidence to help us, not guesswork. So here goes. I'm going to start with technology, because we're surrounded by an amazing array of technological tools out there, and my organization is quite a heavy investor in edtech of all kinds, from AI tools for maths to job matching companies to new ways of organizing assessment and so on. So I'm an enthusiast. I'm really keen on the potential of technology, but I just want to throw two challenges at really the edtech field sort of before going on. The first is, to me, it's amazing how many fantastic technologies miss out two crucial steps towards being useful. The first step is learning, which is paradoxical for the field of learning. And you can see this particularly with many of the MOOCs of the last 10 years. They learned almost nothing about what we've learned about learning. How to learn, you need an existing structure of knowledge to fit the new learning into. You often need support from peers, or some coaching, or repetition. All sorts of things have been learned over the last decades about online distance learning, mainly ignored, and as a result of ignoring those lessons, huge amounts of money have been unnecessarily wasted in what are still very exciting technologies. And the second thing is test in the present. And one of the things we're working on in the UK is creating more formal test beds with hundreds of schools. So if you are an edtech entrepreneur, you can try it in a real classroom environment and get evidence to see if it works or not. Because many really promising ideas don't actually work in the real world. And this is a missing bit of the ecosystem all over the world, is structured, systematic testing and experiment, so there is evidence for the effectiveness of edtech. It's kind of obvious, it's not rocket science, but I hope we keep these 2 points in mind because they are missing in 90% of the discussions on edtech and its potential. So, the next thing I want to talk about is where jobs and skills might be going in the future. And I'm going to share a few bits from a piece of work we did looking at the US and the UK, working with Pearson and Oxford University and other partners, trying to make sense of what were the reasonably predictable patterns of the near future. And to do this, we gathered lots of data, we created expert panels looking at what might happen in things like, I don't know, waiting or hospitality or professional services, then using machine learning algorithms to look at the likely patterns of change to individual skills within jobs rather than whole jobs in order to get a picture of the probabilities of future change. And out of that, we get pictures of which fields are likely to see jobs growth, which will see jobs decline, and so on. And Ivanka Trump tweeted this work a few months ago. It still is quite serious, despite that, I should say. It doesn't completely undermine its credibility. And this shows, in some ways, some predictable patterns about very repetitive manual and office jobs disappearing, some perhaps more predictable patterns on jobs growth, but some quite surprising ones, which I will share. So one is about which skills are most likely to be in growing demand in the next 15 years. This is what came out of the analysis. And so critical thinking, it's interesting you mentioned that. Judgment, fluency of ideas, ability to learn, to think in systems, originality, these turn out to be crucial parts of the skill set of large parts of the economy of 10 or 15 years' time, but they are hugely different from the priorities of most education systems right at the moment, which are still thinking of knowledge transmission rather than knowledge transmission plus these kind of capabilities and competencies. We can also, out of this analysis, look at lots of details. I'm just going to share one of them. So, for example, there's a big long-term trend towards creativity being a useful thing to have in jobs, and not just sort of design and advertising and fashion, but also actually fairly everyday jobs like plumbing or construction. A little bit of creativity helps you. But we can also see that some combinations may be particularly potent in the future, like being creative but also having project management skills or business skills. And in construction is both being good at construction but also good at marketing. And so this analysis is actually quite useful for pointing to the likely future patterns. A few weeks ago, we published an analysis of digital skills. Which digital skills are likely to grow in demand and which ones will shrink? And interestingly, perhaps not surprisingly, many current digital skills will almost certainly see diminishing demand in the next 5 or 10 years. MS Office, I'm afraid, is on that list there. You may see that these are the diminishing ones, these are the growing ones. Top of the growth there is animation. Again, quite surprises some people until you start reflecting on it. And we found many of the skills providers are essentially still responding to the demands of 5 or 10 years ago, not the demands of 5 or 10 years' time. So we think these are really important tools for helping the industry as a whole, a learning industry, to be smart and future-oriented. We also try to make some predictions about what jobs might exist that don't now exist in the future. This is quite difficult, looking at which component skills appear to be most in demand. And out of that, we got a picture, which we published, and we also showed which current jobs are most similar to the new jobs which don't exist now but could well do in 10 years' time. And each of you in your mind will probably have an answer to that question. You may think it is, AI programmer, cybersecurity, and so on. Those will definitely be important areas of very specialist jobs growth, but their numbers will probably be quite small. And this is a clearer picture of the kind of jobs most likely to grow in the next 10 years. They're jobs like window dressing, florists, chefs, running pubs and bars. And in a way, this is kind of obvious if you look at the history of labour markets, precisely because some sectors become dramatically more productive and technology intensive. Often it's the relatively labour intensive other service jobs which grow most. So an education system needs to be preparing people for these jobs, as well as having an element of digital skills, because they will all have a digital element within them. So there are lots of counterintuitive patterns when you look at labour markets. Now, as I said, the challenge is that many education systems are much more focused on the past than on the future. And we've just in the last couple of weeks launched a fund in the UK, a future readiness fund, funding experiments to gather data on how to really cultivate skills of judgment, collaboration, emotional literacy, all the things which are often missing from the core curriculum. So that's the future. What about the present? The other thing which we've been doing, and with partners around the world, is looking at current jobs demand and what we can learn from that. And here the main tool is scraping the web to look at millions and millions, 40 million job adverts in this current analysis, to break them down by what skills they're looking for and what the pay rates are for those skills. And these are some sort of diagrams of, therefore, how we map the current snapshot. This is the UK, but we can do this for other countries too. What is the current demand for different kinds of skill? What's the pay range you could expect within each of those skills? And we can then look at that over time and look in more granular detail at some of the highest growth and highest salary sectors. So any data engineers in the room? Probably quite a few, aren't there? Well, you're right in the top right-hand corner, so great place to be. And you can see other ones from surgery to accountancy, etc. And accountancy has actually still got quite a good future, despite, again, 20 or 30 years prediction that all accountants will be replaced by a computer, which might have been a good thing for the world, but I won't say that. And then the one other thing for the real nerds in the room is creating taxonomies, so we have a common language of skills. And here, most countries have long-standing occupational codes and so on. We've been trying to generate data driven taxonomies which reflect the real patterns of skills in the economy. And if you're interested, so this is all online, and we're trying to encourage the LinkedIns and Googles to use this kind of taxonomy. Now, where does this go? So the key takeaway I want to share with you is really a thought that what may happen in the field we're all part of is what we're beginning to see happening in other fields, which is the emergence of new combinations of collective human intelligence and data and artificial intelligence. This is happening quite fast in fields like science, with citizen science projects. Duolingo is a good example of how they're combined in a commercial offering. In healthcare, it is gathering pace. And if you're interested, I've written a book on this from Princeton University Press, which sets out many of the different fields. These new combinations of intelligence are taking shape. And the key for any field, really, is whether it's possible to create what we call intelligence assemblies, where you link together your observations, your models and predictions, your learning, your creativity, linked into learning and action and loops, so that a whole field becomes smart about itself, becomes more than the sum of its parts. And one of our inspirations for that is Google Maps, which probably some of you use to get here, which is a really good example of an intelligence assembly. Google didn't have many of the elements they needed for Google Maps, so they bought a series of companies, some listed there. They had open APIs, so lots of people developed websites which use Google Maps. They had an open map maker, so the public could fill in missing bits on the map. And together, it created something much more useful than the individual components, something which was more than the sum of its parts. We're trying to do the same for jobs and skills, to create a Google Maps, so anyone, a 14-year-old at school, a 50-year-old losing their job in a warehouse, can navigate from where they are now to where they want to be in their job and career, knowing what the options are, knowing what the pay is, knowing what one extra skill might make them most employable. And we've launched prototypes of this, which we're calling Open Jobs, with gathering together these present and future data sets, linking it to apps which you can use to search through different trajectories. We're trying to add into this all current skills provision, so you can help, say, understand which one extra skill, which might be project management skills or animation, could really make you more employable in the future. And looking to implement this at city and national level around the world. So I think there's a big, big prize in all of this if we can, as a whole field, become, in some ways, collectively intelligent about the things we're talking about. So collective intelligence about ed tech means drawing on the lessons of the past, don't make unnecessary mistakes, testing relentlessly in the present to see what works, what combinations of technology and humans really make a difference to learning, and then seeing if we can really pull together lots of different data sources into very simple, very usable forms which can help young people navigate the future. And this is a time of great fear about the future. This is my final point. Certainly across Europe, many people think their kids will be worse off than them. Many think the future is a dark one where AI will take their jobs, take their data, take control away from them. And so there's a backlash happening. And if we, this sort of community, can't come up with positive alternatives which show how people can take control of their life, take control of their skills, take control of their education, we will see a regression and a reaction. So I hope some of this will have maybe annoyed you. Some of this may be new to you, but I think there's actually some relatively easy wins for us if we find ways of collaborating and being collective intelligence about our own tools and our own activities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so I'm going to talk about a novel called Catch-22. You may have heard of it. We'll get to that. But in the novel, There is the problem that there's a pilot who doesn't want to be a bomber anymore, and he says, I'm crazy. And they say, well, anyone who is crazy wouldn't say they're crazy, so you're not crazy. And he says, fine, I'm not crazy. Then great, then get in the bomber. All right. All right, so let's talk about the promise of online education. On the surface, it seems like it should have already won. It is vastly cheaper. All right, so in the United States, we actually pay a lot of money to go to school. I know many people from European countries don't, although you still have to pay a lot out of the tax dollars. So it's a matter of who's paying more than how much it costs. Online education is also much more convenient. Right? You can just do it from your home. You don't need to change your residence. So it seems like just in terms of the ease of getting it, it would have already taken over. Furthermore, online education provides much higher quality instruction because everyone can learn from the best. Right? In any area, there is going to be a best person to lecture on Aristotle. There's going to be a best person to go and lecture on calculus. And if you have to do it physically, hardly anyone gets to listen to that person. But when you do it digitally, there's no reason why a billion people could not listen to the very best person on that topic on Earth at any time. All right, all of this suggests that online education will provide a very bright future for students, and of course it will provide a very grim future for brick and mortar schools for people like me. Here I have to think about 10 years ago, I had a colleague who was already panicking about our jobs being destroyed. Right? And he's like, oh my God, like, you saw what happened to the record industry. This is going to happen to us, Brian. And I said, well, in 10 years, your son's going to be going to college, right? Right. So are you going to let him go to an online university, or is he going to a regular one? He says, no son of mine's going to an online university. God, no. I'm like, well, then I don't think we're going to have to worry, because there's going to be a whole lot of parents who's going to give exactly the same answer. And you know what? Not only has that guy's first son gone to college, his second son's getting ready to go to college. And our jobs appear to be perfectly secure for now. All right, so you look at this incredible potential, and yet it seems that not much is happening. Now, when I was going over my slides yesterday, I said, wow, that's a terrible title for this audience, but I'm going to stand by it. All right, now, there's an enormous amount that's going on, and we can look at all of the stalls outside, but what fraction of the revenue of education have you guys captured? Have you captured 1% of the revenue of education? Doesn't seem like it. So it can be a great industry to work in, it can be fun, but you are not doing to education what Napster did to the record industry, not even close. So 10 years ago, there are many observers predicting an online revolution, but traditional education has greatly expanded in Europe and continues to grow in the US. So over here, we have a graph of 18 to 24-year-olds in the US that are enrolled in traditional four-year colleges. We can see it's actually gone up over this time. So again, about 10 years ago, I did make a bet with people, and the bet was that the share of these 18 to 24-year-olds enrolled in four-time colleges would fall no more than 10%. If you take a look, there were a couple years like, oh, maybe I'm going to lose. And now I'm back to higher than where I started, so I'm not worried anymore. All right, so what is going wrong? How is it even possible that online education can lose even though it provides cheaper and better teaching? It's baffling. And here's the harsh reality. Students' primary goal is not to learn, but to get better jobs and make more money. Students are barely interested in learning. You can really see this in their faces. Like you're talking about something. Oh, all right. It's like money. Oh, wait, money? Okay, now that's interesting. All right, so here is a quote from Kevin Carey in the New York Times. He's someone who's been pushing online education for a long time. So colleges are holding technology at bay because the only thing MOOCs provide is access to world-class professors at an unbeatable price. That's it. Just the best teaching for free. All right? Who cares about that? What they don't offer are official college degrees, the kind that can get you a job. All right, but how is this disconnect between learning and earning even possible? All right, and here we come to the heart of my book, The Case Against Education. When you actually experience education, it's hard not to notice that most classes teach no job skills at all. Think about all the classes you've been in where you knew even at the time you were never going to use anything that you learned in class. And were you right? When you said, wow, I'm not going to use Aristotle in real life, did it later turn out, oh wow, how wrong I was? Turned out that the Nicomachean ethics is very, very useful on the job. So what fraction of jobs ever use knowledge of history? Very few. Higher mathematics, right? Or music and art, right? Or Shakespeare, right? Or Latin. When I'm in the United States, I also throw out foreign languages in general because Americans don't learn foreign languages. But here I know many of you are listening to me in a language that you learned in school, so that's an exception. All right. Now, it is easy to use to explain this disconnect using what is called the signaling law of education. The main idea. Some school raises your productivity, reading, writing, math. I'm not talking about that stuff, which is only a small fraction of what's going on. Right? A lot of what's going on in school is what we call jumping through hoops, hoop jumping, where you go and there's a hoop and you go through it and go, ta-da, look at me. I just jumped through 7 hoops. I'm an amazing person. You ought to hire me. Right? You're doing it to show off or to signal desirable traits, to signal your employability, to show off your intelligence, how smart you are, to show off your work ethic, how hardworking you are. And finally, this one's going to be very important, your sheer conformity to show I am a docile sheep. When you tell me what to do, I don't say why, I say, yes, sir, I'm going to do it with excellence. I am going to be a fantastic doer at whatever this stupid thing is, because you're the boss, and that's what the boss asks for me. Right? One of the best ways of thinking about education in the signaling model is this. What is education? It is a passport to the real training, which occurs on the job. Education is a passport to the real training which occurs on the job. All right, so think about this. There's 2 ways you can raise the value of a diamond, and they both work. One is to improve it. You get out the expert gem cutter, and he cuts it perfectly. The other one, though, is to give it to the guy with the monocle, and he certifies it as, oh, yes, this is a wonderful diamond. It's great. Both of these methods work. It's not like one method raises the value and the other one doesn't, but they do it in 2 different ways. All right, now all this is certified by Princeton University Press, so you can believe it. All right. Why should we believe that I'm right and most people who study education are wrong? All right. Well, in the book, I spend a lot of time just going over, first of all, the sheer uselessness of what most people study. And then I also talk about how much people forget. People remember only a very small share of what they learn, and it doesn't make sense that employers would pay you for what you used to know. Employers want to pay you for what you know now. Right? There's also a great deal of evidence, contrary to what you've heard, that learning how to learn or learning how to think is mostly a myth. There's a whole field of educational psychology that has been studying this for 100 years. They want to believe that learning how to learn is enormous. Then they study it in the world and say, wow, there's hardly any learning how to learn. Learning is actually extremely specific. Then how do people get good at their jobs? Again, by doing. By doing. You don't become a pilot by going to a critical thinking class. You become a pilot by getting in the simulator and having an expert pilot sit and say, you just crashed the plane, you just killed us. Good thing this is a simulator, because otherwise we'd be dead. All right, and you do that for many, many months, and then finally, after a long time, they say, okay, now we're going to put you in a real plane. Now, if you make a mistake, we really do die. And you practice that for a long time. All right, so you may have heard of Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers. In it, he talks about the 10,000-hour rule. The 10,000-hour rule is wrong in that it isn't really true that you can make anyone a world expert in 10,000 hours. However, while it is a wrong theory of excellence, it is a correct theory of improvement. Anyone can improve in 10,000 hours, and that's how the world actually runs. Right? But anyway, so furthermore, you can also see that people who get degrees, even in subjects that seem quite useless, make considerably more money in the job market. Your degree in anthropology opens doors to the world of business, even though the business has nothing to do with anthropology. But they say, well, if you get an anthropology degree, all right, all right, fine, you can be a banker. Right, that'll be okay. All right, now, here's some other reasons to think that I'm right. If you bother to enroll or pay tuition, you might be signaling. All right, well, suppose you think that Princeton is the best university in the world. Here's my advice for you. Do not apply to Princeton. Do not pay them any money. Simply move to the town of Princeton and start attending classes. No one will stop you. I have been a student there. They do not check your ID at the door. No one asks questions. If you are compulsively honest, you can go to the professor and say, I'm not really a student here, but I'm very interested in medieval history. And the professor will first have stunned silence, like, and then a little tear will come down his eye. It's like, you want to learn what I have to teach? This has never happened before in all my days. There's just one little thing that will not happen at the end of 4 years of free education. You will not have a diploma. You will not have grades. And therefore, the actual labor market benefits of the education will probably be denied to you. You might be signaling if you worry about failing the final exam, but not subsequently forgetting what you learned. Again, you think that employers would pay you for what you know now, not what you used to know. That's if they're hiring you for the skills. But if they're hiring you for the certification, it is a different story. If you go and get straight A's in ancient philosophy, and then you apply for a job, right? And someone says, well, he probably forgot most of that ancient philosophy already. Like, who cares? All that matters is that he showed that when he applied himself to learn a difficult, boring body of material, he was able to do it extremely well. And you know what we do at this office? We also teach people to apply a boring body of material. So we think that this person is going to be great. He has convinced us that he is able to learn. That's all we care about. We don't really need to know what it is that he really learned. He won't use it. You might be signaling if you don't think that cheating is only cheating yourself. Right? If you were in school to acquire skills, a cheater just pays money to receive nothing. But if you were there to get certification, a cheater cheats his employer because they think they're hiring someone good and they're not getting that person. And you also cheat your fellow students because you devalue their work. You make their signal less valuable. No one wants to go to a school that is known for cheating. Even the cheaters don't want to go to those schools. Cheaters want to go to a school that has a reputation for perfect honesty, and then be the one exception. You might be signaling if you seek out easy A's or whatever the top grade in your country is. Very standard in the United States. I'm looking around to get to someone who's an easy grader. It's like, well, what if you don't learn much? Who cares? What I want is to get great grades, and therefore employers will see it, and they won't know that I had the easiest teacher of astrophysics in the world. Right? And of course you might be signaling if you rejoice when teachers cancel class. I actually canceled class to be here. Right? And did my students say, you monster, we paid for this education and you will give us every bit of it? No, they were like, oh good, all right. All right. Now, can't students just signal online? If they're only signaling their intelligence and work ethic, then they probably can. But when you want to signal conformity, there is a catch-22, as I mentioned at the beginning. Signaling conformity in creative new ways signals non-conformity. If someone comes and says, I have an amazing, radical way to signal your conformity, who's going to be the first person in line for that product? It's not going to be conformists. It's going to be weirdos, oddballs, people who don't fit in, people who don't follow orders. And that's the problem. All right. Now, furthermore, since education signals a package of desirable traits, partial signals strongly suggest offsetting weaknesses. Have you ever known someone who was brilliant who dropped out of high school? Yeah, they're fun people. I love them. They're great friends, but I don't want to hire them. Right? All right. And what is it? Look, if you're smart enough to do that, like you're this smart, you could have gotten through school easily. So why didn't you? Well, I just didn't feel like it. Oh, all right. You just didn't feel like it. Well, maybe if I hired you, you just wouldn't feel like doing any of the other annoying stuff that you're going to have to do. Because every job involves some annoying stuff. Even the best jobs. So, like being a movie director, isn't that fun? And you watch a behind-the-scenes video. Oh, wait, it's kind of boring in a lot of times, actually. So, there it is. All right, hence we have what I call locked-in syndrome. Right, as long as the first people who exit the traditional route are, on average, subpar, non-traditional routes send a bad signal. You can be learning far more for far lower expense, and yet you are making employers nervous. Right? And employers, when they are nervous, there is a simple thing they can do to stop being nervous. Throw your application away. Right? If they have 100 applications and they have received a number from non-traditional applicants, they can say, well, there's the non-traditional applicants. Some of them might be good, but I'll never know. They're going in the trash. Right? And again, the question in the minds of employers is generally, if you had the right stuff to get a regular college degree, why didn't you? I've often talked to CEOs who tell me, oh, this is all wrong. Now all employers care about is skills. And my question for them is always, how many non-traditional employees do you have in high-skilled jobs? Like, me? Well, none. But I read in the newspaper that other people are doing it. Yeah, so I'm not going to defer to your opinion anymore because you're not talking about your first-hand experience. Now you're just talking about something you read. All right, the path forward. How can we make online education great again? The correct answer is, it's great already. It's amazing. If we went back in time and I could see what you guys were already doing, I would have said, that's impossible. You have a machine that has all the knowledge of mankind for free at the fingertips. But the problem is that online education primarily competes with blogs and other forms of edutainment, not colleges. And as a result, online education remains a niche market with weak monetization. Right? Again, 1% of the revenues of traditional education would be a big step up. So what can education innovators do to move forward? Here's step one. Admit you have a problem. Yes, this is an Alcoholics Anonymous picture below. Admit you have a problem. Right? As long as you keep talking about improving learning without discussing certification, you are dodging the main problem. It's not enough to just teach people better. In fact, we could teach people amazingly well and it still wouldn't change very much. We've got to change the meaning of the degree in social terms. We have to change what employers think about the degree. We have to change what parents think about the degree. We have to change what the students think about the degree, about the meaning of it, how convincing and persuasive it will be. So great learning for rock bottom prices just isn't remotely enough for success. Right? And Ian, when I look at the stalls, I see so many great ideas for making the learning better. Your learning is already so much better than what's going on in any college I know of. But your certification is what's weak. Certification is what's weak. And that is really where the innovation needs to go, right? Which again is hard, but it's the problem that must be solved if you're going to put me out of a job. All right, I'm not worried. But even if you do put me out of a job, hopefully someone will endow a chair for me somewhere, as out of gratitude. But all right, now step two. Step two. You've got to mitigate this stigma of nonconformity to make your signal worthwhile. How? All right, well, there's the low-risk path, which is already going on right now, and that is partnering with existing schools. So right now, it is very normal for prestigious universities to partner with prestigious online universities. They come up with a product together. So you'll have MIT X, which has some of the reflected glory of MIT. But it's X, right? We have to put the X behind. And when people say MIT, I always say, what, MIT X? Yeah, yes, X. All right. But there are higher risk paths with bigger upsides. So there's partnering with employers. Partnering with employers. So rather than try to convince people that employers are going to value your online education, you could try to convince employers to value it. You could actually try to get the employers pre-ready or even to pre-commit to hire your students. Right? So this is what some innovators are doing, and this is the kind of thing where you can say, look, what kind of a job are you going to get with it? You're going to get this job. Here is this guy. He hires 100 graduates every year. We convinced him to do this as part of it. So that is one possibility, which is a good way of cutting out the fear. There's targeting specific industries. So rather than saying we're just going to give you a lot of teaching and then we will move on, say, look, these are the specific industries we're preparing you for. Then there's creating the in-house apprenticeship systems. Again, this is where you need to, either you yourself are bringing employers in, so you are paying the employers to come and apprentice your students, or on the other hand, you are flipping it around and you are getting jobs for your students while they are still your students. Right? And another possibility is the introductory merit scholarship. So you need to get the kids that were going to go to Harvard to come to you. How much would you have to pay those kids to come to you? I don't know, maybe you have to give them $300,000 scholarship to get them to come to you. But if you can start advertising, this is like the Teal Fellowship. We are getting the best of the best, doing something nonconformist, so maybe it'll work for you too. All right, and finally, motivational painting. Don't let this be the future. This is a painting from about 1200 AD. This was a classroom back then. You will notice it looks a little familiar. Namely, it looks like classrooms today. So please let us move beyond this and see what we can do. Thank you.
Astrid, just 1 second. Just 1 second. Guys, my inbox is filling up. Twitter's going berserk, as you might expect after that. Two great opening speakers. Astrid's up in just a second. Just one quick question. The hashtag is OEB18. I want more. So please keep tweeting, keep letting us know what's your reaction. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What questions do you have? Anita.
Thank you. So, learning how to learn, I'm going to say that, even though you had a point on it earlier. Learning how to learn or learning new skills is one of the things that sets us human beings apart, right? We can adapt quickly. We are about to hit an age where machines that we've built will also have that ability, learning how to learn, learning new skills. And in a time where machines can learn, that will fundamentally change how we learn. And it might also fundamentally change the things that we need to learn and what we need to learn. I want to give you a quick, so I know that artificial intelligence or machine learning is one of those things that most people are starting to have a little bit of a grasp on, right? 2016 was announced as the year of AI, 2017 by Fast Company then, 2017 was announced as the year of AI by Forbes, 2018 was also announced as the year of AI. I mean, we're seeing a trend here, right? And everyone's getting kind of a feeling for what this artificial intelligence thing is. But for those of you who are still a little baffled by what this really is, I want to give you a quick kind of explain it to me as if I was 5, and then I'm going to explain why that model is wrong as well. But let's start simple. Machine learning and artificial intelligence, it's really just software, right? You got some hardware, you got some software, you got some data. It's not that different from, let's call it regular, old school software. The big difference is this. Regular software works much like a calculator. You give it 1 plus 2, you get 3 every time. A plus B always equals C. It's pre-programmed to do that. But when it comes to artificial intelligence and machine learning, it works more like a human brain, which means if you give it A plus B one day, you might get the answer C. But over time, as that machine sees more and more data, it will learn, it will adapt, and it will give you more and more accurate answers. And it can learn new skills. Now, there's 3 major, and this is kind of how it's usually portrayed in mainstream media, and it's a great model to understand the difference. There's 3 reasons why this is highly problematic. First of all, we really don't know how the human brain works. So when we say that we're building machines like the human brain, it's like, yeah, we're kind of improvising here. Secondly, when we talk about the machine working more like a human brain, we all kind of have this picture of like humanoid robots. You've all seen like the robot Sophia and her road shows. And AI is, again, it's kind of just hardware, software, data. It can take any shape or form. It doesn't have to be humanoid. It doesn't have to have a voice. It can be very, very different than that. And the third, and probably most important point, is that our human brains, as magnificent as they are also incredibly flawed, right? Do we really want to build machines that work like the human brain? Shouldn't we rather focus on building machines that are different than the human brain, that are complementary to the human brain? But besides those 3 things, it's a pretty decent illustration of the difference between a calculator and a human brain. And I want to give you a few examples of how we're going to see artificial intelligence change the learning landscape over the next few years. And there is probably about 1 billion examples. I'm going to give you a few. First of all, I want to talk briefly about what we're doing in my company. The starting point for us was that 3,000 papers plus is published every single day in science, technology, and medicine alone, right? And then there's patents, and then there's internal R&D memos, and there's grant applications, and there's all of this incredible data. And I personally believe that if one human being with our little limited brain could sit down and read all of that and understand it, would solve a lot of problems on the spot. Now, human brains are limited, so let's build a machine that can do it for us. We've set out to build what we call an AI researcher or an AI scientist. And that's kind of a 10-year or so undertaking until we have that AI system that can help us do innovation and find solutions from existing literature for us. Obviously, running a business, you have to start somewhere. So what we've done already, which is kind of state-of-the-art and what you can do, is build these tools where we semi-automate the literature review process, right? So going from, hey, I have this problem statement, I want to branch out and find, say, 10,000 articles that are within, the realm of what I'm looking for, and then narrow that down. And today, already, we can reduce that process, the time to do that process, with about 80%, and also remove some of the kind of high in-depth skills that you need in that process. And that's what we're doing today. The next thing we want to do, and that we're working on in our R&D department right now, is to do hypothesis extraction. So take a research paper, extract the hypothesis. After that, you can start doing argument mining of each of the arguments presented in a paper, match them up against each other, build a truth tree of a document to actually assess how likely this document is to actually have some truth to it. Obviously, this is easier in harder sciences, less easy in let's call them softer sciences. And then after that, once you have those truth trees built out, you can build a machine on top of that that can do inference, and that can actually extract new hypotheses, then connect that to a robotic lab or a simulation environment. Then you actually have a machine that can do research for us and with us. So that's what we're working on. And we'll obviously change the, if we succeed, and there's no guarantees for that, if we succeed, or if someone else working on the same succeeds, we're going to see a radical change in how we do research, but also a lot more innovation and knowledge that can be extracted, and then obviously having human beings for the understanding. And I'll get back a little bit to what skills we need in that world later. A few other examples, which I'm not personally working on, but that we will see going into the future. I'm just calling this one tutor per child, right? Imagine if your kids had a personal tutor that gets to know them, knows how they learn best, knows what they've already learned, knows where they need extra help, can identify their skills from a very early age and mature those skills and their passions, and help their human teachers do the best they can for that child into grown-up life. And really, why stop at children, right? Why not also focus on lifelong learning? And no, this picture is not a mistake when we talk about lifelong learning. You know how it is when lifestyle diseases most lifestyle diseases can be very easily prevented, right? Moving our bodies, eating more healthy. That's why they call them lifestyle diseases. So, you know that feeling when you get home from work, and it's, depending on what country you're in, it's 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and you kind of curl up on the couch, and you're like, I should go for a run, but I'm really comfortable right now, right? Imagine having a system that knows you better than you know yourself, and know exactly what to tell you in that very moment to get you off of your ass and go, running or climbing or whatever it is you want to do, right, in that moment. That is the kind of those are the kind of systems that we're talking about. So these are very kind of direct learning. But the interesting part is that there's so many other things as well that will have impact on how we need to learn. Once I started kind of giving these talks on AI, I went home to my dad. My dad's a lawyer, a really good one. And I told him that AI will radically affect the legal business. And he's kind of laughing a little bit at me and say, well, we're always going to need lawyers. First of all, I don't know if that's true, but I guess it's the same as accountants. We'll give it another 20, 30 years. However, how it works right now is you graduate university with more or less skills. We can debate that later. You graduate, you go into business, and for the next 3, 5, 7 years, I'm personally not a lawyer, so I haven't been through that ringer, but you sit and you do the grunt work. The nitty, gritty, tedious, kind of annoying grunt work to get to senior lawyer. All of that grunt work will very shortly be done by machines. Yes, we're going to need senior lawyers for a long time, but how do you turn a junior lawyer into a senior lawyer without all of that grunt work? And that's kind of your job, right? We need new models. So my dad's business is going to fundamentally have to change how they educate their new employees, because the junior lawyer positions are going to very rapidly go away, even though we're still going to have senior lawyers. Another example of the same is this, it's called an otoscope. It's basically a microscope that can detect malaria in blood, really convenient. As you might notice, it doesn't actually have the things you look in as a doctor, because this has machine learning image recognition built into it, so it can detect malaria in blood samples in the field without anyone actually needing, having the skills and needing the skills to recognize those blood samples. Now, this is built for areas where there are no doctors, right? So it's an incredibly useful, incredibly powerful invention. But then the question is, when those results get better than the human doctors, quicker, cheaper, and more accurate, we're not just going to use them in the field where there are no doctors. We're going to start using them in hospitals as well, right? So give it another 5, 10 years, doctors might not need to know how to look for malaria in blood samples, potentially. So these are just, 5 kind of randomly picked, maybe not as random, but 5 picked examples of some of the ways that artificial intelligence and machine learning will change the landscape of learning. And I mentioned earlier how we really don't want to build, machines shaped after the human brains. And here is one of those reasons why. And I don't expect you to be able to read it. It's just one presentation of how much cognitive bias that our brains come with, right? And one of the things, and don't quote me on the number here, but one of the things is allegedly we only store 20 to 30% of our memory, right? If anyone of you have read the research experiment about the lady in the red dress, where basically we can trick our brain into remembering things that wasn't really there, right? And that is one of the reasons why we don't want to build these machines like us. So in that context, and we've already talked a little bit about, or Jeff talked about the kind of the skills that we need in the future, and from a very kind of analytical perspective, these 4 things that I'm going to present to you now is more kind of my take on the things that we need to learn. And actually, funnily enough, the first one is critical thinking, right? I didn't learn source criticism until I was 22, studying Norse mythology, of all things, in university. And I had a professor who presented me with 2 papers from the same Viking grave and had me read and analyze both of them. And I was like, I looked at it, and one was like from the 90s. It was all about like Freya and goddess cults, and every seed was like a symbol of, fertility cults and stuff like that. And the other one was a very factual, very concrete, 10, 15 years later. And I'm like, oh, that's why you do source criticism. And the fact that I hadn't gotten, I was a straight A student. It took me 22 years to get that. We need to teach our kids, and apparently our grown-ups, that source criticism and critical thinking is of vital importance. Because as we build these machines, and we're already seeing this with the internet, with online information, anyone can post anything online, right? But even more so, who built, so like let's say you have an AI that can tutor your child. Who built that machine? Why did they build it? What is their business model? Right? So like, let's take Google as an example, and everyone likes picking on Google. Google's not an evil organization in any way, but let's say Google will be the first company that reaches artificial general intelligence. What's Google's business model? Selling us more soap, right? So we're going to have a general intelligence whose goal in life is to sell us more soap. It's not that it's evil per se. It might be a really good intelligence with the best intention, but its intentions is to sell us more soap. So what does that do with the output of the algorithm, right? So we need to be critical about who's building it. Like, let's say it was our government that built the tutor for the children, right? Would you trust your own government? Would you trust, the Chinese government? Would you trust the Venezuelan government? Would you trust the Norwegian government? Like, or the US. I wasn't going to bring that up. Jeez. But yes, right? So we need, more than ever, we need critical thinking and source criticism. Complex problem solving is another one that was also, on that list, where we need to be able to hold that complexity and the uncertainty that we're looking at in this new age of machines that can learn. We need to do that as human beings. It is a long time until machines can do that for us, the complexity, and we need to have that understanding. When the machines tell us why they've made the machines have made the choices they have, we need to be able to understand that. Creativity as well, which is, again, one of those skills that come up. Can machines be creative? Absolutely. We will teach them. I was a theater student back in the day, and my theater teacher said, and she was absolutely brilliant, and she said, everything is already done before. What you need to do is you need to pick the parts that are done before and make it your own. And actually, that's something machines are quite good at already today. Still some way to go. It's hilarious to read machines that have if you have time and a break, Google for you know, an AI that created a legal commercial. It was trained on like 10,000 hours of legal advertising in the US, and it wrote its own lawyer commercial. Creative work. It's actually hilarious, but maybe not for the right reasons. But anyway, we need that creativity until and together with the machines, because that is an important skill set. Finally, and this is not on Jeff's list, but I believe this is one of the most important things. And I do believe that it is something we can learn, that we can teach both our kids and potentially our university students. I'm not, you know, maybe, which is empathy. So, and the reason why, right, and I work in AI, and I give a lot of talks on AI, and one of the kind of default questions is always like, are you building Skynet? Like, will Terminator be the prediction of the future? And, you know, machines are just, they're tools, right? They're useful. Much like we picked up a rock the first time, you could use that rock to smash a nut, or you could use it to smash in someone's head, right? Machine learning and AI is the same thing. And when I look at this list, I go like, these are really important skills to have when we're dealing with artificial intelligence and machine learning. But like, it's not just about not building evil machines. Like, this could help us like not build so many evil human beings as well, right? And so I think that if we teach this to our children and to our you know, youth and adults, and you know, hold each other accountable for this, we can actually end up having machines that can learn empathy, that can, you know, let's call it learn to love, that can be good for the world, but it has to start with the human beings, and we have to be very, very, very aware of what we're teaching each other, what we're teaching our children, and how they apply that in this future of machines that also can learn, because ultimately, it is us that they learn from. Thank you.
Woo. We've got roughly 25 minutes. I've got several pages of questions here that people have been throwing up and observations during that, and quite understandably, because I think we were all made to think, challenge ourselves, perhaps we got a bit angry, perhaps we had some light bulb moments. I'm going to throw some questions very quickly at the panel, ask them for their feedbacks. While that's happening, then I'm going to come out and ask for any thoughts from the audience. So if you've got a question, a burning question, hold it just for the moment, if you would. Quick first question. Is there a contradiction between the messages here? We shouldn't bother to go to university and learn, but at the same time, when we go there, we are learning probably how to learn if we do it right, and we're showing that we know how to learn. What do you think? Brian, you're never short for an argument. What do you think? Is there a contradiction here?
Possibly. I mean, the main thing I would say is that it's not that no one has ever learned how to learn, but it's so rare that it's very hard to see in the data. Right now, there is a debate among people who do this research as to whether there's any better way of doing it, or whether it's just that nothing that we currently do works. And that's one where I leave it to the people that are actively doing the research. But in terms of the methods that we currently have, the actual measurable effect upon learning how to learn is just very hard to see.
Jane, you agree?
I mean, I think so, and I think, you know, the example, just from my own personal experience, how do you predict someone learning source criticism from a course in Norse mythology? Yeah. Right? It's not systematic. It was quite random and quite baffling, because, you know, but you don't have systematized it. You haven't systematized it. That was a terrible phrasing. Sorry.
I think it's a word.
I really hope that we can get AIs that do critical thinking, because almost no humans do.
Jeff, any thoughts on this one?
Well, maybe I'll throw in one. I mean, I actually agree with almost everything Brian said, but I think there's an answer, or part of an answer, which is changing how recruitment is done. And one of the companies which we've incubated and now is doing quite well essentially gets employers, when they're recruiting, to completely ignore qualifications, to ignore gender, race, etc., and use an entirely challenge-based, competency-based recruitment processes.
This is now being used by many big employers, both public and private sector, partly to respond to pressure on biased recruiting, but it actually also has the great virtue of undercutting the signaling economy, which Brian articulated so clearly. So I don't think I mean, it's going to be a hard job, but I don't think we should take your analysis as a given. We don't have to stick with that forever. If we actually got a labour market, an employment world, which really looked at people's real qualities, rather than their piece of paper, that would be great progress. And then you'll find often what they're asking people to demonstrate is fluency, speed of problem solving, critical thinking, because those are actually the things you need as an employer so much.
But is it really true they're using that for recruitment, or do they use traditional signals until they get to the very final cut and then they do your thing?
No, we're using it right from the start. It's crucial it's used right from the start, otherwise it doesn't work at all.
And the question is, like, you talk about, like, fluidity and you know, creative thinking, et cetera, but it's, a friend of mine looked at the VC industry, and the VC industry, the venture capital industry in Europe, always talks about wanting ambition. And then my friend put it really distinctly, it's like, yes, they want ambition, as long as that great ambition fits into this neat little box that we've defined over here, and that's great, and that's what we're looking for. And the question is, like, is HR, like, and my previous company was in the HR industry, and man, it's conservative.
Yeah,
Almost
we want
venture capital, which is the most biased, class-skewed, gender-skewed industry on the planet.
It's intense.
And since it has such an influence on EdTech, it's really damaging that it has so many deep biases in it, which at last are being talked about at least.
Yep.
It's a really good point. And Neil did say from the audience, he said, look, surely the thing is not to try to teach to the job, but change the way recruitment happens. So I think you're echoing one of the points from the audience. By the way, I chose my degree in my university entirely on signaling. Hands up, okay? But also, I have found that some of the philosophy I learnt, bizarrely enough, did prove useful later on. There we go. But again, it couldn't be systematized, and I couldn't predict that that was going to happen. What about people in work? Hannah asks, look, I'm hardwired to ask about not just people going for full-time education, but people learning while they're at work, either learning in the workplace or coming out to learn outside the workplace, either physically or online, at an institution. We didn't really touch on that. Any thoughts about that? Well, presumably, Jeff, you have.
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously the great challenge of the next 20 or 30 years, if any of these technologies start having big impacts on big areas of work, is lots of people will need retraining, reskilling, learning new mindsets as well as new competencies. And there's a very uneven pattern across the world about how good the systems are for doing that. Scandinavia has always been pretty good and put a lot of money into it. Countries like Singapore and France are experimenting with giving people an account, a personal account they can then buy new skills with. My country is useless at this, and indeed it's cut the spending by 50% this decade, just as it's needed even more. And one of the reasons why I'm so keen on things like Google Maps for jobs and skills is that if you have those accounts or you lose your job, you need help to navigate your way through a labour market which is very different from the one you knew when you were a teenager or child, or that your friends know. So I think that the job everywhere is to combine some rights to new skills, lifelong learning, really good navigation tools, and often coaches and advisors as well as the online ones, because here, as in so many fields, it's the combination of human and data which is valuable, and then really good provision on the things which really matter, which won't just be very narrow skills in law and accountancy, etc., but also learning new mindsets like critical thinking.
Is signaling going to apply everywhere, Brian, even in part-time learning?
Yeah, I mean, of course, although there's better and worse kinds of signaling. There's signaling by actually learning something useful, which both learns something useful and convinces people that you're capable of learning more. And then there's the kind of thing that usually goes on in school where you're learning something that you're never going to use again. I mean, I would say that probably the most undervalued kind of learning in the world is on-the-job learning. Because we usually only classify something as training if you call it training day. But every day is training day. Right. There's always learning going on. And again, this does explain, solve the mystery of how does the modern world work given how little useful stuff schools teach. And that is, jobs do what the schools should have been doing, which is preparing people to actually do practical skills. And they do it without getting any much recognition or gratitude, but I'll give it to them. Thank you.
Is there an AI answer to that? There must be, come on.
I think there's something to the kind of tutor and helping you and understanding how you learn best, et cetera. And you know, learning on the job also encompasses a variety of different things, like how do you learn best? And I think there's a lot of interesting things you can do with AI there. What I do want to highlight is the Google Maps skill space. Again, like, you know, figure out who Jeff is before you trust that skill set, right?
Yeah. Well, as the Buddha said 2,000 years ago, believe no one. That's the starting point. That's the starting point of wisdom, including us.
That's really reassuring when your plenary speakers say, yeah, just don't believe what we're saying, guys. It's really, really good. AI, okay, Sarah says, AI will do the tedious work of the legal professions, for example. But then what happens when people come in? Generally, you learn how to be a lawyer by doing the casework, doing the discovery phase, going through those piles of documents. Suddenly, is there a gap between being an entry level and being a senior lawyer? And if so, how do you overcome it? Go on.
Well, there will be.
Okay.
I'm just doing the AI part. You guys figure out the rest.
Great, okay, it's on us.
No, but I mean, that is a very clear challenge,
Yeah.
right? And you have to have, you know, on-job training programs. And you know, there might even be a choice that goes, okay, we're not going to implement these, you know, AI algorithms to do this grunt work because we want our junior lawyers. But the problem is that you're not then going to be competitive, right? And I was speaking to a C-level executive at a massive international corporation who was laying off like a percentage or two of their staff,
Right.
as a result of a combination of hardware and software. And you know, I asked that person like, why, you know, how did you go about making that choice? And what he said was like, well, I ultimately have a responsibility to my employees. That is my ultimate responsibility. And if we don't let go of these people, we're not going to be competitive, and we're going to be gone in 5 years. So this is something that you have to do to be competitive, which also means you have to have the systems in place to then train them. You know, with pilots, you do simulation. You know, maybe that could be a way to go about it. And maybe there are ways to do it faster, right? And there needs to be experimentation on this, because I don't necessarily think sitting 5 years and doing really boring stuff is the best way to learn.
It may even be that, for example, with the legal profession, it's a cop-out to get highly qualified people to sift through bits of paper, and it's a really, really inefficient way of training people. Maybe there's a better way of doing it, and we could work on that.
And if you look at the work we're doing with science, it's the same thing. Like, why would you have someone who has 15 years at university to sit and literally read, 10,000 titles to figure out what might be relevant? It's an incredible waste of resources and really, really boring for the people doing it.
Yeah.
Just one comment on the law. We all love talking about the law. In a way, it's an amazingly inefficient field, the law. In the US, I think it's at least 2% of GDP goes on an enormous army of lawyers. And in some parts of Europe, you can't sort of move without a notary and this, that, and the other. And attempts to reform it have nearly always been knocked back by very well-connected lawyers. As one of Emmanuel Macron's formative experiences was trying to reform the notaries in France. I actually think this is a field of great potential, and we've just started a project with the main regulator of lawyers in the UK, essentially doing just what you said, Anita, experimenting with AI tools which can reduce the cost of law, mainly for small businesses, and it will automate a lot of fairly standard stuff by making sense of things. So you then have the human beings to do the more complex interpretive things. Right. And I think if that's done seriously, and if the lawyers are not allowed to stop it, it will release a lot of value, save a lot of cost, ideally so people can use their brains for more interesting activities.
Yep. The slide that struck me most on Anita's presentation was on the medical AI, because I don't know how it works here, but in the United States, when you get your eyes checked at the eye doctor, you have a person with a minimum of 21 years training who says, does it look better like this or like that for 20 minutes? And I'm thinking, you don't need any AI in order to mechanize this. Yeah. It could be done by a programmer in 5 minutes, and it still hasn't been done. This is not low-hanging fruit. This is fruit on the ground, rotting.
Yeah.
And whenever I'm there, like, how can this be? And just realizing, like, it's great to go and make AI better, but even to just make basic use of stuff that we've had for decades, it's like...
Yeah, but Brian, eyes are sensitive things. I've had eye surgery. You go and lie down. I don't want a robot with a laser in front of my eyes. even if it's going to be better than the person. For some reason, I want a person doing it. Isn't that a barrier? Everything we're talking about.
I do not want a person doing that.
Okay.
Humans are incredibly,
They're bad, it's true. But still, I don't know. I can't explain it.
Laser corrective surgery is already automated, isn't it?
I haven't had
think
one.
it
I don't
is.
know.
Okay, so quick show of hands. If you had to have an eye operation, would you go for, firstly, we're going to say, would you go for a machine? Secondly, would you go for a person? Machine? Oh, and person. You know, I'm just a conservative old fuddy duddy. All right, these guys are the future. You want to be talking to them. You are, fantastic. One tutor per child, Marjolaine said. One tutor per child sounds great for knowledge, okay? But what about social skills? We're talking a lot about information, knowledge transfer here. Surely we need to be also encouraging, when we're talking about education, the development of a whole person.
Absolutely. But the challenge now, and I have no idea like how it is in Germany, for example, or 72 countries or something. So, you know, in Norway we have 28 students or 28 kids per teacher, right?
Yeah.
How is one teacher going to take care of both the knowledge and the social skills for 28 students, right? Kids are being overlooked, kids are being missed, and kids with behavior problems either get all of the attention or none of the attention, right? Like the math simply doesn't work, and if you can have these tutors, they can I mean, an AI system can also recognize, let's say, antisocial behavior, or, you know, let's say you couple it with wearables, you can actually measure a child's anxiety levels and know what social settings that makes them anxious. And I mean, I can go on and ideating about this, but fact is that those are things that are measurable as well. And if you have a tutor, no, it shouldn't just look at the knowledge. It shouldn't just look at like what skills do you have and are you better at sewing than at doing woodwork, you know, or, you know, social sciences, etc. It should also look at who you are as a person and you know, read your social skills, read, you know, what might this kid need help with. And then, of course, there has to be human interaction in it. I'm not saying that one kid should sit locked up in the room with a tutor for 18 years.
Can I just add to that? I think if we were designing schools and universities from scratch now, on the one hand, we would have a stream which was about knowledge transmission and disciplinary brilliance in physics and engineering, etc. But we would also, I think, have personal coaches to help kids learn resilience, self-knowledge, all those other things they need. And at the moment, in most countries, universities are hopeless on that second part. Schools do it sort of by chance often rather than by design. So there's a basic design issue here, and some schools do now have a coaching function and feedback, etc., but not many. And then I think the technology can help on both sides. In a way, what's odd is we've had fantastic innovation on the pure sort of knowledge transfer side, see the best professor at Yale or Cambridge, etc., but very, very little investment and experiment on how AI can help with that feedback. And I actually think there's a lot of emotional smartness in AI. We've run many events on this over the years, how they can help, again, complement the human being to help a teenager or a student, as I say, understand themselves, understand the sort of heuristics, the behaviors which may help them avoid mental illness or depression or sort of a setback if they can't, you know, feeling really bad or they can't get a job, all these things. And yet it's largely invisible in the sort of ed tech world.
Sorry, I thought you were just about to come in.
No, I'm just agreeing.
Just nodding furiously.
Right now, there is this kind of wave of, let's call them, wellness is a terrible word for it, but like wellness AI applications. And I have a friend that runs an organization called the Trans Tech, is it 200 or 2000? Anyway, it's this top list of like incredible apps that are like, you know, an AI that works as a psychologist, right? Not as the only way, but as a way to engage with a tool in between your appointments, right? And I think, one of the things that I think is an interesting thought experiment, which is, you know, similar to what you just said, is that, you know, in Norway, once every year or so, and I'm again talking about as a child, you know, you would get that message over the speaker going, Anita needs to go to see the dentist. And I'm like, no, not the dentist. And we did that every year. And like, why shouldn't kids also have to go see a therapist or a counselor once a year? just for a checkup, and then if that checkup shows that there's something wrong with your teeth or your mind, let's keep working on it. And I think those kinds of things, like, we're just not doing it.
We're not doing
at all.
No.
But it's not scalable, right? And using new technology, it can become scalable, and it can actually become feasible to bring that into.
And just to be clear, that's not a replacement. You'd have the technology in addition to the personal touch.
Absolutely.
Ryan, you're coming in.
Yeah, so while we're talking about giving every kid a therapist, I've got
They've already got one in
It clearly
America,
didn't work for you, Brian.
So since we're in Germany, how about giving every kid a job? Right? Having kids working at much younger ages. Americans don't understand the German vocational education system, and I do have to tell them about it. But you've got something very good here that America does not have, and my understanding is you're moving in our direction, which is terrible. Right? The Swiss are standing pat, so be like the Swiss.
Okay.
And, there's no reason a 14-year-old can't start doing a job, and that teaches a lot of social skills, vital social skills that many Americans who are 30 don't have. So,
Okay, I've got a quick question for you, just for Brian. I'm going to take the box into the audience, going to catch because we can't do everything on Twitter. I want to catch thoughts you've got, so get ready to throw your hand up as I come into the audience. But quick question for you. Brian, you're a professor. You work in this system. How do you justify yourself? How can you?
I'm a whistleblower.
All right. Any thoughts? I feel like a street hawker on the streets of Istanbul. Anybody want to ask a question through the box? We're all happy when other people are doing it invisibly over Twitter. Nobody wants to put their hand up. This is why we use tools and AI. Here we go.
I was really interested in the point you made, Brian, about employers wanting conformity, but do you think the need for increased innovation in response to the turbulence of the world today will force them to look for people who don't conform?
No. Here's the thing, is that employers value a certain kind of creativity. They value creativity in an assigned task, according to the goals of the organization. They don't value global creativity. Global creativity is when you say, is what our firm is doing even worthwhile? Why are you the boss? Maybe I should be the boss. You can't really run an organization like that. There's no I in team. You do need to have some conformity in order for any group to actually function. So, I'm not criticizing employers so much as pointing out an ugly truth about the world. Although, again, I would like it if we could get a more accurate judgment of the individual rather than just putting someone in the category of college, non-college, or went to Princeton, didn't go to Princeton. That is doable in principle, that we could get a finer gradation of ratings. Although, I see us moving more away from that rather than improving, unfortunately.
In your work, Jeff, do you see anything about companies wanting to hire somebody a bit left field?
I think, some do. And indeed, many companies will try and deliberately recruit the non-conformists, but they keep them in a separate bit, the innovation team, the design team, the creative, so they don't get too close to power.
Any thoughts? Anybody else want to shout into the box? Go on. Oh, right, okay, it's a test. You've got a microphone, fantastic. Okay, then I'll come down the front after that. Go ahead.
Thank you. Question to Anita about empathy. I love the idea of teaching machines to be empathetic. What happens if those machines become more empathetic to machines? Is there an ethical issue there?
Absolutely. So the question was, if machines become more ethical towards other machines as opposed to towards humans? More empathetic towards other machines.
Whoa.
That absolutely can happen. One of the things, though, that I think is a misconception, again, is that when we talk about machines and humans, there is a very clear us versus them, right? They're the robots, they're the machines, we're the human beings. And if we look at it, because your question is really in the long-term perspective, right? We're not talking the next 5 to 10 years, we're talking, let's say 30 to 50 years to give it some time span. I don't think we're going to see an us versus them in terms of human and machines. I think humans will become more and more, intertwined with technology. We already are. My iPhone is part of my memory today. I have no idea. I wouldn't be on this stage if I didn't have my iPhone telling me, oh, you need to get up now and you need to, go to this place. And we'll be more and more, ingrained with it and have it more and more implanted. I got my first chip implant a couple of years ago, really just for the fun of it and a neat party trick. But we are going to be more and more merged with technology, and the same way technology might be more and more biological. So I think 30 to 50 years from now, it's not going to be as clear of a distinction between human and machine. Now, could there be a gradient where, some machines more favor other, humans and machines that are more machine-like? Potentially, absolutely. And it's one of those things that we need to discuss and need to keep in mind. Although shorter term, I think we have a lot more issues more pressing issues to deal with, like how do we avoid building our own racism into algorithms of today? I think that's far more urgent to deal with, and if we can deal with that properly today, we'll be better equipped for the future.
We have a hand down here. There we go. Catch.
So my question is more in the short term. If you look at work and if you link it to the empathy that is necessary, how about the self-worth of people? Because you can see that you can see it now that you used to be able to be the expert of your village, and now you're never going to be the expert, even though you have a lot of expertise. So how about self-worth in this complex AI?
So, AI and in a connected world. So in a world where you can find the person who knows the most about something in the world from your phone, does that reduce the sense of people's self-worth and expertise? We'll do that, we'll do one more question, then I'll ask you guys to wrap up. So quickly, is there an issue there?
So it's again, a very, very big question. And again, I think it's what do we teach our children, right? We teach our children in this kind of industrial complex where you should be the best and you should be compliant and you should be all these things. And I think, again, I don't think empathy and self-worth is separate. I think they're very much interlinked. And I think the more empathy you have, the more you will understand that you can be empathetic towards yourself as well as with every other human being on the planet. And you don't have necessarily the need to become the expert in anything. You can't become like the best in empathy, right? That's the whole point of empathy. And that's a very fluffy answer, but I think it's the best I have.
Anybody else want to weigh in? Go on, Jeff.
Well, just to say, I think it's almost slightly psychopathic to want to be the world's very best on anything. I don't think most people work like that. I think one of the reasons why I agree with some of what's been said about learning by doing is I think if kids from 14 onwards have the real-life experience of working in a team on real-life things with other people, they gain self-worth because they are being useful. They're getting recognition from their peers, and they don't have to be the very best in the world. It's much more micro than that. And that's why I think we do need more learning by doing in some parts of education. The paradox is the one field which completely depends on learning by doing is the one which shouldn't, which is political leadership. In Europe and North America, when you become a president, a governor, a minister, you've never had any training, and you still get no training at all. Really, in China, they do constant lifelong training for everyone from the president to governors and ministers. I teach at their school which does this, and they believe that alongside learning by doing, you do every now and again need a bit more formal pedagogy. And it's a terrible flaw of our systems that the very top roles have no systematic learning at all.
Especially those who have no practical experience in other fields in politics.
But Jeff, I do aim to be the best in my world in one thing. It's Thursday today. Thursday's football night. I should be in London playing in goal for my five-a-side team. Our kids all went to school together. The kids left school. We still play. My goal is to be the best goalkeeper in the D League, yes, it's the bottom league, of the five-a-side side in Chiswick on a Thursday night. It's a small goal, but I still aim to be the best in that one. Our last question, then we're going to wrap up.
Yeah, I've just got a question if we don't have a fundamental problem with the technological development that we're facing. Because I'm a huge fan of AI, and of course I watched Star Trek when I was a kid, so I love the computer. The problem is that if we had that computer today, we would get ads all over the screen of Starship Enterprise, and thinking about how AI development takes place right now, it's either very political driven, like in China, or it's very capitalistic driven, like at Amazon or Google. And if we look at what all those assistants are aiming at, and we look, for example, at the Google assistants that can do phone calls to schedule your flight and things like that, it's pretty much all coming from a customer perspective, a capital optimization perspective, and things like that. And I'm kind of afraid that we will be steering into a hyper-economical driven society, or a complete cyber-controlled political dystopy in that field. And that is something that, of course, you experience firsthand, I assume, with grants and everything. So,
Okay, so
how to handle that?
very, very quickly to summarize that, are we going to be slaves of either capitalism or conformity in the state via AI? If not, how do we avoid it? Then I'll ask you to wrap up.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not worried about Google making me buy the wrong kind of soap or anything like that. So, I mean, in terms of governments taking advantage of it, so with China's social credit system, I think that does give you a feel for how totalitarian it could potentially be. I think that it's unlikely to take over, but I'm a little worried.
Okay. Any answers?
No, I mean, I think it's, again, one of those really big concerns that we need to keep talking about. We need to understand who's doing what. There are also others working on it. It's not just Google and governments. Can they find sustainable business models? Can they become the next Google that is not strictly tied to a business model that might skew the results of, booking of flights through the Home Assistant? But yeah, it is a worry. I mean, I'm in general, I'm quite worried about capitalism. I don't think it works to our advantage, and I would like to see it go, not replaced by authoritarian regimes, though. We need to find a better model.
So
And then
short
we come
answer-
into universal basic income and other systems, but that will be for another
We
day.
don't really have an answer on that one, but the good news is we've got 2,000 people here who are going to share some of these concerns, and let's make sure we have that conversation over the next 2 days. I'm going to ask our panel very quickly to give us 20 seconds. I know I said a minute, I'm boiling it down to 20 seconds, of insight for everyone in the room to take away with. We've got 2,000 people here who are leading in their roles in learning and development in the workplace and education. What's your parting thought for them, Jeff?
Well, on AI, I think we should both be incredibly hopeful and incredibly fearful at the same time. And the only way we can therefore navigate our way through is to ensure the next stage of the journey isn't just dominated by the military, surveillance agencies and big business, but actually we have real-life experiments involving teachers and parents and kids to work out how we get the greatest value out of these technologies without the huge risks.
Fantastic. Informed fear, if you like.
And I'll say you need to take all of the creativity they're putting into learning and move most of it over to certification. You're great at learning, but that's not what people are after. What people are after is certification. If you don't break that, then you're not going to get more than 1% of the revenue.
That'll be music to the ears of some people in the room I know. And finally, Anita.
The future is incredibly complex, sometimes very daunting, and yes, very scary for a number of reasons. So we need to bring I'm going to say it again, our empathy and our hearts, and it's kind of your jobs now to bring your own empathy and your own heart into building the future.
Your panel in 4 words: informed fear, certification, and empathy. Ladies and gentlemen, give them a big hand, please. Okay, we wrap up now. We've got a break. Please don't forget, during our break, which could be, which will vary according to what you do next, please don't forget to visit the exhibition. Don't forget to join in with your colleagues and have a great 2 days in the rest of the event. Thank you very much, guys. Great job.